Kings and kingdoms will bow down, and every chain will break as broken hearts declare His praise. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb, and every knee will bow before Him. So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. The God who comes to save is here to set the captives free. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? 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 Who can stop the Lord? Yeah. Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chain, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before Him. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name. Sing that again. My hope is built. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior. My anchor holds within the veil. Oh, Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love, the rule the storm. He is Lord, Lord of all. When He shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in Him be found, dressed in His righteousness alone, faultless to stand before the throne. Oh, Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love, the rule the storm. He is Lord, Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love, the rule the storm. He is Lord, Lord of all. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name.
40 or 50 years ago, the nation's heroes were usually portrayed only in the best light because there was this desire to keep the public image of our national heroes pristine. Rarely, if ever, was the country made aware of their personal shortcomings. If they struggled with alcoholism or substance abuse or promiscuity or racism or gambling, and we were all blissfully ignorant that they had those qualities because it seemed important to everyone to keep their private image and their public image separate. Now, the Bible, to the surprise of some, never does this with its heroes. The Bible always reveals its heroes, warts and all. This is one of the reasons why some have argued the Bible cannot be a man-made document, because men are not inclined to report their own failings, their own shortcomings. You think Moses wanted the world to know about his temper problems? You think Peter wanted the world to know about his denials? And yet within the pages of sacred text, we are made painfully aware of their shortcomings as well as their victories. And David is one such hero. Like others before and after him, David both succeeds and fails greatly. The half-brother of Jesus, James, said, "We all stumble in many ways." And today we see more evidence of how David is stumbling in his move from faith-driven life to fear-driven life. And this move has an impact not only on him, but also on those around him. So let's take a look now in 1 Samuel chapter 20, beginning in verse 1. Then David fled from Naioth at Ramah and went to Jonathan and asked, "What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he is trying to take my life? Now, you would think that David might have been impressed with the fact that Saul kept sending men to kill him, and the Lord kept thwarting those attempts of Saul's to kill David, and that he would have taken comfort in that fact. But David has moved from faith to fear, so he doesn't think about that. He doesn't think about how 4 times Saul sent men to kill him and the Lord intervened. And what does that reveal to us? It reveals to us that David did not need to actually flee from Saul because the Lord was going to protect him. The Lord had already told him that he was going to be the next king. But when faith turns to fear, we don't think clearly, and confusion results. Note that when David's focus now becomes Saul and Saul's persecution, and is no longer on the Lord and the Lord's provision, self-protection and self-justification emerges. What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he's trying to take my life? Verse 2, never, Jonathan replied. You're not going to die. Look, my father doesn't do anything, great or small, without confiding in me. Why would he hide this from me? It's not so. So Jonathan's in denial about what Saul is doing. David wants to set him straight. So in verse 3, David took an oath and said, look, your father knows very well that I have found favor in your eyes. And he has said to himself, Jonathan must not know this or he will be grieved. But I'm telling you, Jonathan, as surely as the Lord lives and as you live, there is only one step between me and death. Jonathan is obviously torn between his loyalty to his father and his loyalty to his friend. But David says, look, Jonathan, your father has tried to kill me several times. He's not going to tell you of his plans because he knows that you and I are friends. But I am literally at the tipping point of death. Why does David feel this way? David has been told by the prophet Samuel, God's prophet, that he's going to be the next king. This would seem to suggest that Saul has things to worry about, not David. As a result of David forgetting the Lord's promise that he would be the next king, his faith begins to buckle under the constant strain and pressure of Saul's jealous pursuit. Some might wonder why David stood up so well to Goliath and so poorly to Saul. And as I've already mentioned on several occasions, I think it's because the duration of the test, David is able to muster faith in a short burst. But he has trouble mustering day-to-day faith for a challenge that seems constant and never ending. When he was asked to face Goliath, all he had to do was muster the courage to go out there and trust the Lord to face Goliath, and it would all be over in a short period of time. But the test of his faith with Saul is more long-term. There are ups and downs. He's not able to get any closure in the situation with Saul. For this reason, the test with Saul is more severe than the test with Goliath. Jonathan said to David, whatever you want me to do, I'll do for you. And what David is going to want him to do is to lie. So David said, look, tomorrow is the new moon festival, and I'm supposed to dine with the king. But let me go and hide in the field until the evening, the day after tomorrow. And here's the lie I want you to tell. If your father misses me at all, tell him, David earnestly asked my permission to hurry to Bethlehem, his hometown, because of an annual sacrifice is being made there for his whole clan. And if your father says, very well, then your servant is safe. But if he loses his temper, Jonathan, I'm telling you, you can be sure he is determined to harm me. Now, once fear enters your heart, once doubts enter your mind, sin of various kinds will easily follow. We see here that David no longer trusts the battle is the Lord's. So now he chooses to fight his own battle, and his weapon of choice is lies. When doubt and fear entered his mind and heart, lies easily left his mouth. And if we pay attention, what we're going to note is this: as David's fears increase, so do his lies, which only leads to more fear. The thing he is using to try to alleviate his fears is only leading to more fear because he's not trusting the Lord with his problems. He's trying to solve them on his own. And this makes him suspicious. He even gets a little suspicious of his friend Jonathan and Jonathan's commitment to him. And so he says to Jonathan in verse 8, "As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I am guilty, then kill me yourself, Jonathan. Why hand me over to your father?" Jonathan's like, "David, why are you even asking me this? Never. If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, wouldn't I tell you?" And David asked in verse 10, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" "Come," Jonathan said, "let's go out into the field." So they went there together. Then Jonathan said to David, "By the Lord, the God of Israel, I will surely sound out my father by this time the day after tomorrow. If he is favorably disposed toward you, will I not send you word and let you know? But if my father is inclined to harm you, may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not let you know and send you away safely. May the Lord be with you as he has been with my father." Now, because David has expressed just the tiniest bit of suspicion with his friend Jonathan, what do you suppose the effect on Jonathan was of that? Well, now Jonathan starts thinking, man, maybe I should be suspicious. He says, "But show me unfailing kindness like that of the Lord as long as I live, so that I may not be killed, and do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even the Lord, when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." Interestingly, at this point, Jonathan has more confidence that David is going to be the next king than David does. So Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May the Lord call David's enemies to account." And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as he loved himself. But are you noticing that it is Jonathan talking about the Lord, not David anymore? Then Jonathan said to David, "Tomorrow is the new moon festival. You will be missed because your seat will be empty. The day after tomorrow, toward evening, go to the place where you hid when this trouble began, wait by the stone of Ezel. And I will shoot 3 arrows to the side of it, as though I were shooting at a target. Then I will send a boy and say, 'Go find the arrows.' And if I say to him, 'Look, the arrows are on this side of you, bring them here,' then that's the signal, David, that everything's okay. Then come, because as surely as the Lord lives, you are safe and there is no danger. But if I say to the boy, 'Look, the arrows are beyond you,' then you must go. That's the signal that you need to get away, because the Lord has sent you away. And about the matter you and I discussed, remember, the Lord is a witness between you and me forever." So David hid in the field, and when the new moon festival came, the king sat down to eat. He sat in his customary place by the wall opposite Jonathan, and Abner next to Saul, but David's place was empty. But Saul's not suspicious the first time this happens. We see in verse 26, Saul said nothing that day, for he thought something must have happened to David to make him ceremonially unclean, and that's why he's not here. Surely he is unclean. But he knew something was up the next day when David wasn't there. But the next day, the second day of the month, David's place was empty again. Then Saul said to his son Jonathan, why hasn't the son of Jesse come to the mill either yesterday or today? And Jonathan goes into his lie that David has asked him to tell his father. And so he says, let's see, I don't remember this lie. Oh yeah, David earnestly asked me for permission to go to Bethlehem. And he said, let me go because our family is observing a sacrifice in the town and my brother has ordered me to be there. And if I found favor in your eyes, let me get away to see my brothers. That's why, yeah, Dad, that's why he's not here. That's why he hasn't come to the king's table. But Saul knew his son was lying. Saul's anger flared up at Jonathan, and he said to him, you son of a perverse and rebellious woman, don't I know that you have sided with the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of the mother who bore you? As long as the son of Jesse lives on this earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Don't you get that, Jonathan? Now send and bring him to me, for he must die. Why would he be put to death? What has he done? Jonathan asked his father. But Saul hurled his spear at him to kill him. And that's when Jonathan knew that David was telling the truth about Saul. Then Jonathan knew that his father intended to kill David, and Jonathan got up from the table in fierce anger. On the second day of the month, he did not eat because he was grieved at his father's shameful treatment of David. In the morning, Jonathan went out to the field for this meeting with David. He had a small boy with him, and he said to the boy, run and find the arrows I shoot. And as the boy ran, he shot an arrow beyond him. And when the boy came to the place where Jonathan's arrow had fallen, Jonathan called out after him, isn't the arrow beyond you? Which was the signal that, David, you're in trouble, you need to go. Then he shouted, hurry, go quickly, don't stop. And the boy picked up the arrow and returned to his master. The boy knew nothing of all of this, only Jonathan and David knew. Then Jonathan gave his weapons to the boy and said, go, carry them back to town. And after the boy had gone, David got up from the south side of the stone and bowed before Jonathan 3 times with his face to the ground. Then they kissed each other and wept together, but David wept the most. Why? Why is this strong emotional response happening here? I think David is ashamed that he ever doubted his friend. And I think also he knows in his spirit that he and Jonathan's lives have been forever changed by all that is going on between Saul and David. And that means their friendship was forever changed. And according to the biblical record, the only other time they see each other is one more time, and that's it. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord, saying the Lord is a witness between you and me and between your descendants and my descendants forever. Then David left, and Jonathan went back to town. And where does David go? David went to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest, and Ahimelech trembled when he met him and asked, why are you here alone? Why is no one with you? And David answered Ahimelech the priest, let's see. Oh yeah, the king, you remember the king? The king, he charged me with a certain matter. Yeah, that's it. The king charged me with a certain matter. And he said to me, no one is to know anything about your mission and your instruction, so I can't tell you anything about it. As for my men, who you can't see, but believe me, they're back there somewhere, I've told them to meet me at a certain place. David still relying on lies to solve his problems. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find. But the priest answered David, I don't have any ordinary bread on hand. However, there is some consecrated bread, some show bread, the bread of provision, which was used in the holy place. You can have that, provided the men have kept themselves from women. And David replied, oh, yeah, indeed, of course, yeah, indeed, women have been kept from us, as usual, whenever I set out on these missions that I lie about. And the men's things are holy, by the way, even on missions that are not holy. And so it's okay if I eat that bread. How much more so today? And so the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. That was only to be eaten by the priest, according to the law. In fact, Jesus refers to this incident with David in the New Testament when Jesus is accused of breaking the law, and he says, "Didn't David eat the showbread?" He's referring to this incident that we just read about here. But note God's being gracious to David when he is neck deep in disobedience. I mean, if grace is undeserved merit, you cannot get any more undeserved than David telling a whopper right at the doorstep of God's priest. Now, one of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg, the Edomite, Saul's head shepherd. And David asked Ahimelech, "Don't you have a spear or a sword here?" "I haven't brought my sword or any other weapon." Let's see, why did I not do that? "Oh, because the king's business was urgent." And the priest replied, "The sword of Goliath, the Philistine, is here, whom you killed in the valley of Elah. It's wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. I guess if you want it, you can take that one. There is no sword here but that one." David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." Now, do you remember when I told you when David faced Goliath, there were certain things I wanted you to remember? And one of the things I wanted you to remember is that when David went against Goliath, he said, "You, Goliath, come against me with spear and sword and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord." But now, David picks up Goliath's sword, no longer talking about the name of the Lord. Remember, Jonathan was the one talking about the Lord to David. David wasn't talking about the Lord to Jonathan. And that day, David fled from Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath. Goliath was from Gath. So he's gone into enemy territory. But the servants of Achish said to him, "Hey, isn't this David, the king of the land?" See, even they knew he was supposed to be the next king. "Isn't he the one about whom they sing in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands." David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, king of Gath. See, David's fear keeps increasing. He keeps telling these lies, and it keeps increasing his fear. And he thought that he could flee into enemy territory undetected, that he could be incognito in enemy territory. But God doesn't allow it. God exposes him. Peter tried to hide who he was after Jesus was arrested. The servant girl asked him, "Weren't you with the Galilean?" "No, I don't know him." "No, I'm pretty sure that was you." God exposes his children who try to hide in enemy territory. And the reason that he does is because God doesn't want his children to think that they can hide in the world and fraternize with the world, hoping to go undetected. Because he does not want us to get comfortable with hiding. At some point, he exposes us whenever we try to hide in the world. Now, note the depths to which David will now stoop to solve his own problems once he is exposed. So he pretended to be insane in their presence. And while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the doors of the gate. He scratched at the doors of the gate like a wild animal and letting saliva run down his beard. And Achish said to his servants, look at that man. He's insane. Why bring him to me? Am I so short of madmen that you have to bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house? Now, here's one of the things with our strategies that we use sometimes when we're not depending upon the Lord, when we're leaning on our own understanding, is that sometimes these strategies appear to work. David might have thought, well, that worked. I pretended to be a madman and I didn't get killed. So that was a good thing that I just did. Well, why did it work? Why didn't Achish kill David? There was a superstition at the time that insanity occurred when the gods were dealing with someone. And that if you were to interfere with the discipline process of the gods on that person, that they would become upset and make you their next target. So that's probably why Achish left him alone. He thought David was under the discipline of the gods. But for our purposes, let us note how David's fear has driven him to literally playing the fool. All right, what are some applications that we can find from this passage that we've gone over today? The first one is this: friendship, like faith, often has to be tested to reveal its genuineness. You're not going to find out who your real friends are when you win the lottery. That is not the time when you find out who your true friends are. You find out who your true friends are when you have hit rock bottom. A friend is described in the Proverbs as a person who loves at all times, and in particular for adversity. And a brother is born for adversity. That's when you know who your true friends are. Now, we learn two very important things about friendship from the friendship of Jonathan and David. And the first thing that we learn is that friendship needs reassurance. First, David seeks reassurance from Jonathan, and Jonathan delivers. We see this in verse 8 of chapter 20, where David says to Jonathan, "As for you, show kindness to your servant, for you have brought him into a covenant with you before the Lord. If I'm guilty, then kill me yourself. Why hand me over to your father?" And then Jonathan says, he gives him the reassurance that David is seeking. Never, no. If I had the least inkling that my father was determined to harm you, I would tell you. But then Jonathan also seeks reassurance from David, and David delivers. David seeks reassurance from Jonathan, and Jonathan delivers. Then Jonathan seeks reassurance from David, and David delivers in verse 14. But show me, this is Jonathan talking, David, show me unfailing kindness that like that of the Lord, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed. I don't want you to kill me either. Do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when the Lord has cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth. And Jonathan had David reaffirm his oath out of love for him, because he loved him as himself. So David seeks reassurance and he gets it. Jonathan seeks reassurance and he gets it. And that's sort of the nature of friendship. The security and reality of our friendship, they have to be tested sometimes to be proven to be genuine. And they need to have this reassurance communicated regularly. It's easy to take your friends for granted. You need to tell your friends, hey, I am really blessed that you are my friend. And this should be communicated both in words and in actions, because our friends need that reassurance sometimes. Everybody needs to know that you are taking into account their opinions, their feelings, and their observations if you are a true friend of theirs. Friends need to be reminded that they are a priority in our life and that we're committed to them. Don't assume that your friends already know all this. Take time to reassure them. Friendship needs something else too. Real friendship. And that is, real friendship is based on people granting each other permission to hold each other accountable. Note how Jonathan agrees to be accountable to David. David asked for reassurance and asked him to do something or watch out for him. And Jonathan said to David, by the Lord, the God of Israel, takes an oath. I will surely sound out my father by this time, the day after tomorrow. Jonathan is willing to be accountable to David and places himself under an oath. This is a big part of real friendship, is allowing yourself to be accountable to someone else. If you have a true friend, then you are willing to explain your attitude and your actions to that person, and they are willing to explain their attitude and their actions to you. A lot of times we expect our friends to stand up for us in public, but they are not allowed to sit us down in private. Well, that is not a friend. A true friend is somebody that you have given permission to sit you down in private when you need to be. Cicero, the Roman philosopher, said, genuine friendship cannot exist where one of the parties is unwilling to speak the truth and the other is equally indisposed to hear it. You got to be willing to speak the truth to your friends, but they also have to be willing to hear it. They have to be willing to speak the truth to you, but you have to be willing to hear it. Accountability means being available to your friends when they need you. And why should we be willing to make ourselves accountable to our friends? Because the proverb says, wounds from a friend can be trusted. If you have a real friend, occasionally out of love for you, they are going to wound you. Because you've gone off the rails. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. Proverbs 27:9, perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of one's friends springs from his earnest counsel. Friendship has value because it costs us something to sustain it. And often the cost to sustain it is honesty. You must be willing to give and receive honesty. This is the real reason why some people are always at a loss for friends. They refuse to speak the truth in love, and they refuse to hear the truth in love. They really want somebody who just multiplies kisses, tells them what they want to hear, but that is not a true friend. Agreeing to be accountable to someone else is the best way to reassure someone else of your friendship, because friendship involves this pattern of give and take. Second application is courage is not the absence of fear, but the conquest of it. David has every right to be afraid, but he is giving in to his fear. He's letting it drive him. I want to take a look at Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Most of us are familiar with that proverb. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Is David doing any of that right now? Let's take the first part of that. Is David trusting the Lord with all of his heart, right in chapters 20 and 21? No, he's not. Why? Because I think David found it easy to trust the Lord with all of his heart if the challenge he was going to face was short term, it was going to be resolved quickly. But David had trouble developing the habit of trust. There's a difference between the decision to trust and developing the habit of trust. A lot of us could make the decision to trust the Lord if we knew that it was just going to be a short-term challenge or obstacle that we had to face. We would be able to muster the courage, Lord willing, to be able to face that because it's going to be over and done. But many of us, if not most of us, have trouble facing the day-to-day, unrelenting challenge and obstacle that never goes away. And every day we have to get up and decide, am I going to trust the Lord today again? Or am I going to lean on my own understanding? David could not muster faith for long-term challenges. He just doesn't. That is a weakness that David has. He can make the decision to trust, but he has trouble developing the habit of trust. And because he has trouble developing this habit of trusting the Lord every day, in each and every circumstance, he does the next thing that the proverb warns us not to do. He leans on his own understanding. And you'll note as David leans on his own understanding, what happens? He becomes increasingly afraid. He doubts God's plan. He doubts God's provision concerning him. Those doubts lead him to lean more and more on his own resources, on his own ingenuity. How can I get myself out of this mess? And he decides the way to get himself out of this mess is to tell numerous lies and to get his friend Jonathan to tell lies for him. He decides the way to get out of this mess is to pick up Goliath's sword to fight his own battle. He decides it's probably best to pretend to be insane to escape death. And now that he's leaning on his own understanding, and it's not helping, and things are only getting worse, his fears are increasing, he's not doing the next thing the proverb tells us to do, that is in all your ways acknowledge him. As I said, David doesn't really mention the Lord in these two chapters. Jonathan does, but he doesn't. But remember before he faced Goliath, how David talked about the Lord? It's like the Lord this and the Lord that, and how dare you, Goliath, and I come against you in the name of the Lord, and the battle is the Lord's, and the Lord deliver me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, and none of that is occurring in chapters 20 and 21. He's leaning on his own understanding. He's not acknowledging the Lord anymore, which is why he never says to Jonathan something like, you know, Jonathan, the struggle is between really your father and the Lord, not me. And it's really in the Lord's hands, and I'm just going to choose to trust the Lord. He doesn't say this because now he thinks the battle is his. And he forgot the battle belongs to the Lord. And because now he thinks the battle is his, he is scattered all over the place, both literally as he runs from place to place to place, and emotionally. He's a basket case. And the last part of that proverb is, and he will make your path straight. In this proverb, God's part in the transaction hinges on David's following the first three principles that are mentioned: trusting the Lord, not leaning on his own understanding, in all of his ways acknowledging him. David is not doing any of that, so his path is not being made straight. This is how the Lord makes our path straight. When we trust him with all of our heart, when we lean not on our own understanding, in all of our ways we acknowledge him. That's how he makes our path straight. And David fails at all three, and so his path was not made straight. Although God is so gracious that God continues to deliver David despite his disobedience. He is lying at the footstep of the priest of God. And God is still in his sovereignty protecting David in one way, but also allowing David to experience the consequences of his disobedience. And there's going to be tremendous consequences to David's disobedience. 86 men and their families are going to be slaughtered because of David's disobedience here in these chapters. 86 men and their families slaughtered because David is leaning on his own resources and trying to fight his own battles. Now, did David mean for that to happen? No. How many times have there been consequences to your sin that you didn't intend? That's one of the problems with sinning, is you can't control the consequences of your sin. Our disobedience and sin lead to unintended consequences. That's why God tries to protect us from it, tell us not to do those things. So why is God allowing David to flee? Why didn't the Lord intervene and go to David and say, David, stay put. I've got things, I'm handling things. Just relax. Why didn't the Lord do that? I think it's because he's trying to teach David not only the rewards of obedience, but the consequences of disobedience. In other words, sometimes you and I have to experience the sad consequences of not trusting the Lord in order for us to better learn the importance of trusting him. Amen? Amen. Let's go to Lord in prayer. Praise team can come forward at this time. Lord, this morning as we consider David at this point in his life when he is struggling, he's confused. His life is not making sense to him anymore. He feels as if you have abandoned him. And so he takes the reins of his life into his own hands. And when he does that, his faith falters. It erodes. And his fears increase. And yet, even though his fears are increasing, his use of his own strategies to solve his problems only lead to more problems and more fears. But he doesn't get that. He's just caught up in this cycle of disobedience and running away. He doesn't yet know it, but even in this, you as the master teacher are teaching him, David, for this to work, you got to obey me. You got to trust me. Especially when your life is not making sense. Especially when you don't understand how I'm working in your life. That is the most important time for you to trust me. That is the most important time for you to resist the temptation to lean on your own understanding. Lord, maybe some of us are in that place here today. We've just let ourselves get away from trusting you with all of our heart. We're leaning more on our own understanding, and we're not acknowledging you in all of our ways. And so we're finding that our path is not being directed. That we're off the path and we're in enemy territory, and often we're trying to hide there and hunker down there for a while. And yet you in your love and mercy expose us, not out of cruelty, but in order to call us back to yourself, to get us to recognize that our hope is not to be found there in that place, in that way. You know, maybe part of David's problem is that he ran away, and Jonathan would have been, if he had stayed put, Jonathan as his friend would have been able to talk sense into him. That he would have been able to speak the words that maybe David didn't want to hear, but maybe he would have said to David, David, you're not trusting the Lord right now. You need to sit back and trust the Lord. What are you doing? But because David fled, Jonathan didn't get an opportunity to do any of that. So, Lord, let us take a moment to say thank you for the friends that you've given to us, particularly those friends who have proven themselves genuine in their attitudes and their actions and their willingness to challenge us when we need to be challenged, and to sit us down when we need to be sat down. Lord, help us not only to have friends like that, but to be a friend like that. Lord, we're anxious to see how David eventually gets back on track. We know it'll take a while. Give us wisdom as we learn from the life of David, both the good and the bad. And we'll be quick to give you the praise for all these things in Jesus' name, and all God's people said,
as I rise, strength of God, go before, lift me up, and as I wake, eyes of God, look upon, be my side. As I wait, heart of God, satisfied and sustained. And as I hear voice of God, lead me on, be my guide, be my guide, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me, yeah. Oh, 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 Christ be all around me, yeah. And as I go, hand of God, my defense by my side, and as I rest, breath of God fall upon, bring me peace, bring me peace, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me, above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be all around me, yeah. Oh, 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 Christ be all around me, yeah. Oh, 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 Christ be all around me, yeah. Your life, your death, Your blood was shed for every moment, every moment. Your life, your death, your blood was shed for every moment, every moment. Your life, your death, your blood was shed for every moment, every moment. Your life, your death, your blood was shed for every moment, every moment. Above and below me, before and behind me, in every eye that sees me, Christ be